counter, but let's just do this in the back office.
I agree.
Okay. This thing definitely cost a pretty penny. No, I think about him every day. You know, he, in his 20s, you know, he had the drug problems. And, I mean, God, I put him in rehab so many times. And every time he'd be doing great, you know, and then it would just fall back. I mean, you have 100 things go through your mind. I mean, there was nothing worse than losing a kid.
Rick Harrison is no longer the funny boss that audiences once adored on Pawn Stars. A shocking truth has just come to light, and its gravity surpasses anything anyone could have imagined. His former assistant, the person who had quietly operated behind the scenes at America's most famous pawn shop, has now officially testified in court. This isn't about a contract dispute. It's not a personal falling out either. It's a serious testimony involving a cross-border human trafficking network, forged documents, and a sophisticated criminal system that had been cleverly disguised under the facade of a reality TV show. Rick Harrison, the man once seen as a symbol of trustworthiness across the United States, might actually be at the center of a meticulously organized criminal ring that has remained hidden for years. Now the truth is gradually being exposed. Each link in this chain of secrets is being revealed one by one. And for the first time, the shining light surrounding a television empire has been tainted by a deeply dark shadow. You need to watch this entire video to understand one thing clearly. Everything we thought we knew about Pawn Stars might have just been a flashy mask, hiding something far more disturbing beneath the surface. 1. The unexpected witness. Former assistant reveals the truth. In the midst of a trial that was initially expected to drag on and possibly fall into deadlock, much like many other celebrity-related scandals, the sudden appearance of a key witness. Rick Harrison's former assistant completely altered the course of events. Though her identity remained undisclosed with no images or personal information released, her testimony became a nationwide sensation within just a few hours. When she asked Rick Harrison why such valuable items weren't being sold, he responded curtly, "Special clients already ordered them, don't ask too many questions." Eventually, she realized those shipments were merely a cover. The real issue wasn't the items themselves, but what was hidden inside or accompanied them. She further explained that during her last 2 years at the store, there was a notable surge in the number of unfamiliar individuals entering the premises. Before appearing in court, she had already worked with her private attorney, handing over a wide range of digital evidence, including internal emails, shipping contracts showing signs of alteration, and a list of temporary staff members who weren't listed in any official records. These documents are now considered by prosecutors as key elements in the ongoing investigation. While the media dubbed her a whistleblower, the court identified her as a crucial witness. According to the case files, this woman had served as an administrative manager and internal coordinator at the gold and silver pawn shop for over 5 years. That period was not only long enough for her to understand every operational detail, but it also placed her in a vital behind-the-scenes role, overseeing transaction records, inventory, personnel, and external relations. During her tenure, she earned so much trust from Rick Harrison that she occasionally signed documents on his behalf, attended meetings with international clients, and managed the intake of major shipments. As a result, she became one of the few people with direct exposure to the reality behind what appeared to be a perfectly legitimate business model. I even tried to convince myself, this is Las Vegas, nothing's ever really normal here. She began her statement with a chilling remark that resonated deeply with those present. According to her account, the first red flag appeared when shipments arrived without proper documentation or were labeled internal use only, not for sale. Some packages were imported as antiques, but were never displayed or put on sale like other merchandise. These people weren't listed as employees, didn't sign in as required, and typically showed up only at night. I once saw a girl, maybe 17 or 18 years old, who spoke Spanish and clearly knew nothing about antiques, yet she was assigned to inventory a shipment from Italy. When I asked who brought her in, she simply said, "Mr. Rick," and went silent. The witness recounted. According to her people, that would appear for a few weeks and then vanish without a trace. They had no employment contracts, no clear source of payment, and seemingly no control over the tasks they were given. At this point in the trial, the court requested the witness to explain why she hadn't spoken up earlier. Her response silenced the entire courtroom, as no one could offer a rebuttal. When you're living in an environment where power is protected by television fame and backed by millions of fans, staying silent isn't weakness. It's a means of survival. She shared that there were times when she considered quietly stepping away and pushing aside everything she had seen. However, an incident in 2021 completely shifted her perspective. She recalled that on a mid-September day that year, a young man had an accident in a warehouse. He fell onto the concrete floor while moving goods, and blood spilled all over the ground. When he was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment, no one knew his real name, and the hospital record simply read, "No identification. No next of kin." Notably, after spending just one night at the hospital, the young man vanished without a trace. That was the moment I knew I could no longer stay quiet. If I kept silent any longer, I'd be no different from an accomplice, she said. Her decision to testify wasn't impulsive or made without preparation. What made her testimony particularly valuable in the eyes of the investigators was the way every minor detail she described matched the records from arrests related to human trafficking along the US-Mexico border. Notably, at least 3 victims had reported being promised jobs at a famous antique shop in Las Vegas before being transported across several states, but it didn't stop there. She also revealed excerpts from internal conversations between Rick Harrison and individuals suspected to be trafficking intermediaries. In an email that was read aloud in court, Rick had written, "The Colombian shipment must arrive the same week the French client's visit. Make sure the escort leaves no trace." Rick's legal team argued that the content could be misinterpreted when taken out of context. However, the timing of the email aligned suspiciously with a human trafficking case under investigation in Miami, prompting the court to treat it with significant gravity. Her testimony concluded with a firm and powerful statement. "I'm not here to retaliate against anyone or to cause harm. I'm standing here because I once worked for an organization disguised as legitimate, and I can't stay silent any longer." Her unwavering tone combined with the compelling evidence presented cast a heavy atmosphere over the courtroom. Many in the audience were moved to tears, and some journalists even had to lower their cameras too, choked up to speak. And the most critical point is this. From that very moment, the case against Rick Harrison was no longer just a matter of suspicion. It officially transitioned into a full-blown investigation now bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. Everything began with one testimony. Not just any testimony, but the voice of someone who had worked behind the scenes, someone who understood exactly how the machine operated, and most importantly, someone who had the courage to speak the truth while countless others chose silence. 2. The sophisticated operation behind the pawn shop. Become a crucial link in a transnational criminal network without anyone noticing. The answer lies in the sophistication of its operational model. A system cleverly designed to conceal illegal activities beneath a perfectly legal façade, television fame, and even the trust of the community. According to business records, Gold and Silver Pawn Shop is one of the long-established legal enterprises operating in the state of Nevada. It holds all necessary licenses to import and export goods, is permitted to engage with international partners, and regularly participates in global antique trade fairs. These characteristics allowed the store to carry out high-value transactions without arousing suspicion. Specifically, from 2012 to 2019, the shop conducted nearly 780 cross-border transactions with a total value exceeding $47 million, involving items such as antique watches, Buddhist statues from Indochina, and relics from both Europe and Asia. However, according to the former assistant's testimony, hidden within these shipments was a sophisticated human trafficking network that exploited the regulatory loopholes associated with items categorized as collectibles. One frequently used tactic was the forgery of documents and the signing of temporary labor contracts, or the use of so-called antique apprenticeship programs as a cover to bring individuals from overseas into the United States. These individuals were promised work at a training and research center for traditional antiquities in Las Vegas, In reality, the location was merely a logistics warehouse behind the store where they were forced to work under unsafe conditions without insurance and were not paid properly. According to the initial report from the prosecution, at least 38 victims have been identified as having been subjected to forced labor under the guise of serving the antiquities sector. Furthermore, the former assistant revealed a significant detail: the existence of an internal encryption system. According to her, shipments labeled VIPX or Red Line were typically exempted from standard inspection protocols. She personally witnessed a shipment arriving from Central America late at night without any official customs documentation. Yet it was stored in the warehouse for 48 hours before being delivered to an internal partner. Tourists who visited the store mainly came to take souvenir photos or buy memorabilia. Few paid attention to the back warehouse or the operational activities within, and that very indifference became the ideal cover for hiding unlawful behavior. Another factor that helps this model run smoothly is the very clear division of responsibilities. Her court testimony lasted more than 4 hours and was clearly divided into 3 parts. First, the process of identifying irregularities. Second, the specific evidence pointing to illegal activities. And finally, the reason it took her nearly 3 years to summon the courage to come forward. At first, I thought what I saw were just hiccups in a rapidly expanding business. After the key witness, a former assistant who once worked under Rick Harrison, testified in court, public opinion immediately raised a major question. How could a pawn shop located right in the heart of Las Vegas, a globally renowned city that welcomes thousands of visitors each day? GPS data from outsourced transport vehicles confirmed a recurring route from Rick Harrison's warehouse to several addresses linked to small farms and private woodworking shops in California locations, previously cited in cases involving illegal labor practices. The operational model of this system has been described as the perfect blend of legal and illegal leaving law enforcement, with virtually no legal grounds for intervention. In addition, the critical factor that allowed this model to endure over time was the protection provided by television fame. The show Pawn Stars is not only a popular TV program, but has also become a symbol representing the image of the honest American businessman, trustworthy, knowledgeable, and sincere. Any suspicions were easily dismissed with justifications like, "We're busy filming and can't monitor every minor shipment." According to testimony from a witness, those who were directly involved in recruiting, managing short-term labor, or overseeing transportation were not listed in the company's official records. They worked as temporary employees or were hired through third-party contractors, with no direct link to Rick Harrison on paper. However, according to the former assistant, it was Harrison himself who gave the final approval for all high-value shipments and decided the list of people allowed to access the storage area. This legally invisible model is described by legal experts as a corporate gray area, where criminal activities are cleverly concealed within a fully operational business framework with books, management procedures, and systems in place. Yet the true goal is entirely outside the boundaries of the law. It is noteworthy that with his extensive business experience and deep knowledge of customs procedures, Rick Harrison could hardly have missed the irregularities. If he were truly innocent, as he claimed, according to an anonymous investigator from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (IC), the model described by the former assistant shares similarities with at least 3 major cases previously uncovered in Florida and Texas. These cases also involved exploiting the supply chain, specifically importing antiques, to cover up human trafficking activities. The common thread between these cases, he observed, is the use of businesses that appear legitimate, are fully licensed, and have international trade connections, making investigations incredibly difficult unless someone from the inside blows the whistle. And most importantly, the person who exposed all of this was none other than the former assistant, who had once been an integral part of that operation, now becoming the first whistleblower to uncover one of the biggest shocks in the history of American reality TV. 3. Rick Harrison's role, mastermind or pawn. When the testimony of the former assistant was presented in court, the atmosphere in the courtroom immediately changed. Suddenly, the case was no longer just a civil dispute, no longer solely about protecting an image or personal brand. It had become a federal criminal case with a famous television star facing the possibility of being charged with serious crimes such as human trafficking, money laundering, and running an illegal business model. But who exactly is Rick Harrison in this complex network? Is he the mastermind, pulling all the strings from start to finish? Or is he simply someone who turns a blind eye to continue profiting without facing the serious consequences? The prosecution's argument was quite clear. Rick Harrison could not have been unaware of these activities. He was the one who approved high-value orders. He was the one who authorized the list of employees with access to the warehouse and held control over the entire internal system at Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. No one other than Rick Harrison had supreme authority over the logistics and inventory process at the shop, the prosecutor emphasized in court. His lead attorney also developed a defense strategy centered on the idea of being internally manipulated, arguing that middle management and the warehouse operation team had exploited Harrison's trust and reputation to carry out illegal activities without informing him. This legal argument is not entirely without merit. In many previous cases in the U.S., prominent businessmen have been acquitted due to insufficient evidence proving that they knew and intentionally participated in criminal acts. However, in Rick Harrison's case, the issue lies in the overwhelming amount of indirect evidence, from the testimony of the former assistant to internal documents and even unclear tax reports. All of them suggest that Rick Harrison was not an outsider in these activities. A legal expert from Stanford University commented on NPR, "This is a textbook example of the legal crime model, where the leader doesn't need to directly commit a crime, but creates an environment in which all criminal activities are protected by indifference, profit, and personal reputation." He emphasized that given Rick Harrison's position and experience, it is nearly impossible for him not to be aware of the violations taking place. Adfao. The situation grew more complicated as the court continued to summon 2 additional witnesses, both former logistics employees at the shop, and both confirmed that they had been instructed to keep all after-hours activities confidential by upper management, and that Rick regularly received reports but never responded. Wow. And then another shocking detail came to light. The former assistant testified that most of the antiques used to conceal the crimes were actually fakes, or items bought cheaply from restoration workshops in China or India. This meant that consumers both domestically and internationally were not only deceived into purchasing poor quality products, but they also unknowingly became a part of a larger global human trafficking network. The information revealed by the former assistant is no longer merely a suspicion or one-sided accusation. It paints a clear and detailed picture of how a criminal network could exist right in the heart of America, under the bright lights of cameras within the public's trust and inside a pawn shop that seemed to merely deal in antiques. According to the documents submitted by the prosecution, at least 12 emails were sent from Rick Harrison's personal account to international partners discussing VIP shipments. These shipments later coincided with the time frame when victims of forced labor were discovered in other states. Another email from 2020 was quoted with the content, "Make sure the person accompanying has the proper paperwork. I don't want any trouble if they get checked at the airport." Bien. The court requested verification of the context, and the defense lawyer immediately objected, arguing that business language is often misunderstood if taken out of context. Rick Harrison and his legal team firmly maintained that he had no knowledge of any criminal activities related to human trafficking. In the first hearing, Rick stated, "I am a businessman. I manage inventory contracts, media, and television production. I cannot control who comes in and out of the shop every day." The former assistant, who was a key witness in the case, also confirmed that Rick not only knew about the activities, but was also indirectly involved in the operations. She recalled an instance when Rick asked to keep the shipment for an additional 3 days because the accompanying person was missing the proper documentation. In another email, Rick requested not to let the new people into the main lobby, but to have them stay in the back with the night shift crew. If these details are verified, they could serve as grounds to charge Rick with active complicity, meaning knowing about the criminal activities but choosing to ignore or not intervene, public opinion surrounding the case became deeply divided. A large number of longtime Pawn Stars viewers refused to believe that Rick Harrison could be involved in a human trafficking ring. On platforms like Reddit and Facebook, thousands of comments continued to express skepticism. He's a good person. If this is true, he must have been deceived by someone else. However, many others responded strongly. If he didn't know, then either he's incredibly naive or complicit. There's no way a boss could let illegal activities happen right under his nose for nearly 10 years. This detail suggests that while Rick Harrison may not have directly orchestrated the illegal activities, he was fully aware of what was happening and chose to remain silent to protect the interests of his business system. Therefore, the question of, is Rick Harrison the mastermind or a victim being exploited, is no longer a simple black and white issue. It now lies in the gray area, where the law must determine the extent of the defendant's involvement, awareness, and intent. If it is proven that Rick Harrison was aware but allowed things to continue, he could face charges of active complicity and even organized crime if there is evidence that he directly benefited from these actions. Although the final verdict from the court has not yet been delivered, one thing is certain. Rick Harrison's public image as a down-to-earth man with a deep understanding of antiques and always willing to speak his mind will never be the same. 4. The cover-up system. Where were the police and the media? A sophisticated criminal operation can run quietly for nearly a decade, not only because the leader is skillful at managing it, or because the victims cannot speak up, but also because an indirect system of complicity has been put in place. In the case involving Rick Harrison, after the former assistant's testimony was made public, the biggest question that both the public and investigators raised was no longer, did Rick commit the crime, but rather, how could such a system have existed for so long in the heart of Las Vegas, right under the noses of the police, the media, and millions of viewers, without anyone noticing or suspecting anything? This is not an easy question to answer, and sadly, the answer is not all that unfamiliar. It is a combination of deliberate indifference, calculated silence, and a mistaken belief in the authenticity of reality television. According to the testimony of the former assistant who played a central role as a key witness in the case, she had attempted 3 times to contact local law enforcement to report irregularities related to personnel and goods at the warehouse. And however, all 3 times, whether she sent anonymous letters or made calls from a blocked number, she received no response. There was one time when I just wanted them to check why some people without employee badges were allowed to come and go freely, but everything just went silent. She recounted in court. On another occasion, she even received an indirect warning from a store manager. The police here don't care as long as we're doing business well. Each episode attracts millions of viewers on the History Channel, and Rick Harrison's pawn shop has become a major tourist destination in Las Vegas. According to data from the Nevada Tourism Office, more than 4 million visitors come to the shop's area each year, partly out of curiosity, partly to meet real-life celebrities. It is a real-life embodiment of the American dream, where a working-class family opens a small shop and gradually builds it into a global brand. In the public's eyes, Rick Harrison cannot be the bad guy. For this reason, the media has almost never raised any doubts. Articles, interview videos, or talk shows with Rick all focus on his success, his passion for antiques, and the amusing behind-the-scenes stories. For nearly 15 years, no journalist has ever mentioned the murkiness in the logistics operations or questioned the strange import and export orders. When you become a TV icon, you are automatically trusted to be honest. A veteran journalist in Las Vegas shared in an interview after the case broke. We were swept up in the image he built. Everything was too friendly for us to doubt. Another reason for this silence is economic interests. Pawn Stars not only brings profit to Rick Harrison, but also generates huge revenue for the History Channel, Las Vegas tourism, and the local community. According to unofficial estimates, the indirect revenue from tourism related to the Pawn Stars brand could exceed $50 million per year. This makes any attempt at investigation or scrutiny easily labeled as damaging the local economy, or worse, ruining the national brand. There are even signs that this protective system has extended to the level of government. Amid this complex web of intertwined interests, the former assistant, the key figure in the explosive testimony, was almost the only one to break the cycle. She was neither a police officer, a journalist, nor a person of power, but it was precisely because she was not part of the system that she was able to see the truth that others could not unclouded by the surrounding halo. 5 conspiracy theories and the deeper layers of the case. This led to the theory that Rick is not the mastermind, but rather a link in the system selected to serve as the face, a person with a reputation trusted by the public and capable of moving this operation into the shadows through the glamour of television fame. The second conspiracy theory, while simpler, is even more troubling. The constant flow of transactions, rapid staff turnover, and close coordination with professional shipping services made everything appear to be in full compliance with the law. Police forces conducted 2 inspections of the warehouse in 2018 and 2019, but found no violations, partly because there were no specific complaints, and partly because all shipments had fully legalized documentation. The revelations from the former assistant have created a significant rift, not only in the reality television industry, but also in the minds of millions who once trusted in the American business model of honesty, success, trustworthiness. While Rick may not be convicted, reclaiming the lost trust will undoubtedly be an incredibly difficult task. What seemed like an ambiguous threat later turned out to be partly validated by another witness, a retired officer from the Las Vegas Police Department who agreed to give an anonymous interview with the media. According to him, the department had received numerous unofficial reports about irregularities at Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, especially the nightly shipping activities and the presence of unidentified laborers on the premises. However, each time a case file suggested expanding the investigation, it was set aside due to lack of evidence or because it was not a priority. One particular phrase in his statement is noteworthy. Gold and silver is a major media asset, touching it would upset the public. And this is when the factor of public credibility begins to show its powerful shielding effect. Pawn Stars is not just an entertainment show, it is a cultural phenomenon. Some leaked emails from within the History Channel, published in an independent investigation by a local newspaper, revealed that the channel's leadership had refused to air any content that could potentially harm the reputation of the main character unless there was clear legal direction. This further reinforces the theory that it wasn't that there were no doubts, but that those doubts were silenced before they could even form. The exposure of the case not only unveiled a criminal scheme, but also revealed a bigger truth in modern society. Reputation can become a shield. Television can turn into a collective sedative, and agencies that should investigate are rendered impotent by revenue numbers and rating charts. And now, when the public has learned the truth, thanks to that one testimony, people are only just beginning to ask, where have the police and the press been all these years? More importantly, if it hadn't been for someone like that assistant stepping forward, would Rick Harrison ever have been brought to light? When a witness like Rick Harrison's former assistant takes the stand and exposes a sophisticated human trafficking and antique smuggling ring hidden behind the facade of reality television, the inevitable rise of conspiracy theories is hard to avoid. However, unlike the baseless speculations we typically see, the theories surrounding the Rick Harrison case do not come from anonymous figures on the internet, but are instead openly discussed by experts, media outlets, and even independent investigators. This is because the revelations not only shocked many, but also raised numerous questions that go beyond the scope of an individual or a business. The first and most widespread conspiracy theory suggests that Rick Harrison is just a pawn in a much larger network, a transnational criminal system with a tightly organized structure backed by figures from the entertainment, political, and commercial industries. This theory stems from a troubling question. Why would a famous pawn shop attracting a massive number of tourists be able to serve as a backdoor for smuggling people and illicit goods in and out of the United States for years without detection? Some human trafficking prevention experts have shared the view that modern criminal organizations tend to dress in legal clothes to operate particularly through businesses that the public trusts. According to data from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, over the past decade, more than 40 human trafficking cases have been linked to legitimate businesses such as restaurants, massage parlors, logistics services, and notably antique or collectible stores. Antiques are valuable, often not scrutinized for origin, and can be traded directly without involving banking systems, making them an ideal industry to conceal illicit money and manpower. A detective noted. In Rick Harrison's case, the model described by his former assistant involving ambiguous imported shipments, employees without paperwork, and interstate transportation disguised as training programs clearly points to a meticulously planned criminal network that could not possibly be run by an individual alone. It suggests the existence of a chain of pawn shops and antique businesses operating alongside gold and silver pawn shop, with Rick Harrison being the first to be exposed. According to the testimony of his former assistant during an internal meeting in 2018, she overheard Rick mention a distribution network in Arizona, Texas, and Miami areas later confirmed to be involved in human trafficking. She also recalled seeing shipping records with labels from at least 4 antique trade affiliates, most of which, upon investigation by authorities, turned out to be shell companies with fake addresses. The question then arises, is gold and silver pawn shop the only center of this operation? Or is this model part of a larger underground corporation, utilizing a network of smaller shops to funnel people, goods, and money past the law? If that is the case, Rick Harrison could be a key player, but may not necessarily be the head of the operation. Some investigators even suspect this could be a network linked to organizations in Europe and Southeast Asia regions, often flagged as hotbeds for international human trafficking and antique smuggling. The third and most controversial conspiracy theory revolves around the indirect connection with celebrities or influential figures. After the incident came to light, social media began circulating old photos in which Rick Harrison had appeared or collaborated with several well-known personalities in the fields of collecting and entertainment. Among these individuals, at least 2 had previously been accused of tax evasion and smuggling antiques. A former production assistant for the Pawn Stars show also revealed to the press that this is not the first time Rick has received gifts from international partners carrying items whose origins no one dares to question. Although these claims have not been independently verified, they have been enough to spark a wave of suspicion. Is the reality TV industry, which claims to be educational entertainment, actually a platform for legalizing illicit activities? In theory, conspiracy theories sometimes reflect public anxiety when official information is lacking. However, in this case, it was the testimony from the former assistant that sparked these theories. What she described, from the organizational structure, the movement of people and goods, to the indifferent response from senior management, did not seem like the action of an isolated individual, but rather a sign of a system, a machine. And no matter what role Rick Harrison plays, he cannot be separated from that machine. As the court continues its investigation, federal agencies have also started to broaden their scope to include Rick's business partners over the past 10 years. This list contains hundreds of names, many of whom are currently living abroad or have been investigated for activities related to smuggling. This reality has made the theory that Rick is just the tip of the iceberg increasingly hard to ignore. However, it is important to emphasize that up to now, there has been no concrete evidence showing the involvement of larger organizations or other famous figures. All the theories remain at the level of suspicion. Nevertheless, the existence of these doubts, combined with the brave testimony from the former assistant, has turned this case from an incident involving a television star into a symbol of the public trust crisis. Whether or not the conspiracy theories are proven true, in the end, one thing is clear. Rick Harrison's case is not simply about a man accused of breaking the law. It is the story of how a system can be built from trust, fame, television, and prolonged silence, until one person decides to reveal it with the truth. 6. Legal developments. a battle inside and outside the courtroom. When the testimony from Rick Harrison's former assistant was officially added to the case file, the lawsuit entered an entirely new phase. No longer a quiet investigation behind the scenes, but an open legal battle where each argument, piece of evidence, and statement could shift the direction of the case. However, as with any major criminal case involving a celebrity, this battle was not only fought in the courtroom, it also spread across the media, social networks, and the minds of the public. At the Nevada State Court, where the case was being heard for the first time, Rick Harrison's legal team quickly implemented a carefully crafted defense strategy attacking the credibility of the key witness, the former assistant. In the first rebuttal, Rick's lead attorney described her as a disgruntled employee with personal motives, implying that her decision to testify was an attempt to avoid responsibility for illegal actions she had previously participated in. She is not an outsider, she is a worker, and now she is trying to reinvent herself as a hero, the attorney stated in court. However, the prosecution remained unfazed. They countered by presenting a series of pieces of evidence that supported the assistant's testimony, from internal emails, shipping logs, and fake personnel documents, to surveillance camera footage showing the frequent presence of unidentified individuals at Rick's warehouse. Most crucially, the prosecution summoned 3 additional witnesses, former logistics employees, and all 3 confirmed that they had received instructions from management not to inquire too much about the special shipments. Faced with this detailed and systematic evidence, Rick's legal team shifted their tactics. They redirected the argument to claim that Rick did not have full control over the operations. Mr. Harrison is a public figure. His job is in front of the camera, not in the warehouse, the lawyer emphasized. They attempted to prove that Rick had been deceived by his subordinates, who used his reputation to cover up illegal activities. In this strategy, Rick was portrayed as a second victim after the exploited workers, but a victim of the very system he had created. However, the prosecution presented a sharp counter-argument. When someone is the primary beneficiary of a scheme, that person cannot be innocent. They pointed out that Rick Harrison was the final approver for all transactions exceeding $10,000 in amount that encompassed nearly 80% of the shipments currently under investigation. They also presented evidence of Rick meeting directly with individuals with prior records of smuggling through photos, exchanged emails, and stored flight schedules. A savvy boss like him cannot not know so much, the prosecutor concluded. Another point of tension during the trial was Rick Harrison's refusal to answer certain questions on the grounds of self-protection under the Fifth Amendment, which allows U.S. citizens to refuse to testify if it could incriminate them. While this is a legal right from a public perception standpoint, it became an excuse for speculation. Shortly after the trial session, social media was flooded with comments, "If he's innocent, why does he need to stay silent? I've lost faith in someone I once looked up to." Not only in the courtroom, but the battle also continued to heat up on the media front. Rick Harrison's PR team hired a crisis management firm, issued a press release denying all accusations, and organized a press conference in which Rick publicly spoke for the first time after several weeks of silence. "I am not guilty. I have never been involved in human trafficking. I am just a father, a businessman, and a TV host," he said with visible tension. However, the press conference backfired. Journalists quickly pointed out the contradiction between Rick's claim of not knowing anything and the evidence presented by the prosecution in court. Major news outlets such as the New York Times, CNN, and NBC News began changing their approach to coverage from a neutral stance to one of skepticism. The support for Rick Harrison in online polls dropped sharply from 65% to just 28% in a span of 3 weeks. A name that was once synonymous with trust on television was now the subject of ridicule in numerous late-night shows. Another key factor in the legal process was the influence of organized public opinion, particularly from human rights organizations. Anti-human trafficking groups, who had once admired the Pawn Stars show for its educational value, now turned to strong criticism. They launched a social media campaign with the hashtag #BehindThePawn, urging History Channel to suspend airing the show until a verdict from the court was reached. At the same time, more than 50,000 people signed a petition calling for the Federal Department of Justice to investigate the networks behind Rick Harrison, rather than letting the case remain confined to state jurisdiction. In this context, the courtroom became almost like a public stage with dozens of reporters present at each trial session, hundreds of protesters holding signs outside, and millions of people following live streams on various online platforms. While Rick's legal team tried to keep the case within legal bounds, the prosecution made the most of media influence to build pressure on the pursuit of justice. The trial was expected to last several more weeks, with a range of witnesses from both sides to be called. However, regardless of the outcome, one thing was clear. This legal battle was no longer just about Rick Harrison. It was about how the American legal system could handle a national television star once hailed as a symbol of American success. And above all this was a fight for the truth, one that was first brought to light not by a celebrity, but by a little-known individual, Rick's former assistant, who not only exposed the crimes but also forced the system to confront itself. And that is the entire story surrounding the shocking testimony of Rick Harrison's former assistant. A trial that is not only judging one individual, but could potentially be bringing down an entire reality TV empire that had long been considered a symbol of American culture. We have gone from a small pawn shop in Las Vegas to the suspicion of a transnational human trafficking network where power media and silence have come together to conceal the darkest secrets. From just a single testimony, from someone who was once part of the system but now dares to stand up and reveal the truth, the entire legal system, the media, and the public are faced with a significant question. Have we been too quick to trust a brand just because it appears on TV? Is Rick Harrison simply a careless boss, as he claims? Or is he really the mastermind behind a sophisticated model hidden beneath the comedic exterior of the show's footage? Ultimately, the answer still lies in the hands of the court. But no matter what the verdict may be, this case has set a dangerous precedent, that things which seem impossible can indeed exist right out in the open if there is enough fame, enough silence, and enough profit. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next developments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.